The night began with bright lights, red carpets, and flashing cameras. Reporters shouted names, their voices rising above the crowd. But in that moment, amidst the glitter and glamour, something felt strangely quiet. Ana de Armas walked on the carpet in a shimmering gown, her smile soft but uncertain. She looked around, expecting the usual warmth, the usual attention, the recognition that often followed her. Yet for some reason, eyes seemed to pass over her. People turned quickly, focusing instead on other stars. The silence that followed. Her steps felt heavier than the loudest cheer. It was supposed to be her night, a night where her efforts would shine. But as she stood there, surrounded by noise yet wrapped in a blanket of quiet, Ana felt a cold sting. Ignored. She tried to lift her chin, tried to keep the smile steady, but inside her heart was whispering questions. Why was no one calling her? Name? Why did it feel like she was invisible? The cameras moved suddenly. A burst of energy ran through the crowd. It was Keanu Reeves. His presence was calm but powerful, the kind that never asked for attention, yet always received it. People leaned forward, the reporters shouted louder, and the fans reached out with eager hands. Keanu walked with his usual humility, offering a small nod to everyone, never rushed, never proud, just present. Ana stood only a few steps away, but the distance felt like miles. She watched as the attention she once thought would be hers slipped into his presence. In that moment, a storm brewed inside her. It wasn't jealousy. It was something softer, something sad. The thought of being forgotten, of being unseen, pressed against her chest, but then something unexpected happened. Keanu paused. His eyes, calm and steady, turned toward Ana. He noticed the silence around her. He noticed how the cameras had forgotten her presence. In that brief second, his heart understood something others could not. He saw not the actress, not the star, but the human being standing quietly, carrying the weight of being ignored. He walked slowly, breaking away from the sea of flashes, and moved toward her. The crowd didn't understand at first. The voices dimmed. The cameras shifted, confused. Why would Keanu leave the main walkway? Why would he turn away from the spotlight? But Keanu didn't care. He reached Ana and gently offered his arm. "Shall we walk together?" His voice was low, almost drowned by the noise, but to her it was louder than everything else. Ana blinked, surprised. For a moment she hesitated, but the kindness in his eyes left no room for doubt. She placed her hand lightly on his arm. The cameras, as if realizing what was happening, turned back toward them. The silence broke, but it wasn't cruel anymore. It was filled with respect. As they walked side by side, the crowd saw something greater than fame. They saw humility. They saw a man choosing kindness over attention, and a woman finding her strength again through that act. Ana's heart shifted. She still felt the sting of the earlier moment, but now it was mixed with warmth. She realized that even in silence, even in being ignored, one small act of kindness could rewrite the moment. Keanu's choice reminded her that respect was not always found in applause. It was found in the quiet gestures that spoke louder than the crowd. Yet deep inside, another question began to grow. Why had she been ignored in the first place? Was it a mistake, or was there something more hidden behind those turned faces? The night was not yet over, and Ana would soon discover that silence often carries secrets. The applause rose again as they walked together, but something in Ana's heart refused to settle. Keanu's kindness had saved her from the sharp sting of being ignored, yet questions still echoed inside her. Why did it happen? Why tonight of all nights? She had been on red carpets before. She had seen cameras chase her, people cheer her name. But tonight, it was as if the world had decided she did not exist. As they moved further down the carpet, Ana leaned slightly toward Keanu. Her voice was soft, careful, almost hidden behind her smile. "Did you notice?" she whispered. Keanu's eyes shifted gently toward her, but he said nothing. Sometimes silence was his answer, and sometimes it carried more meaning than words. Reporters shouted their names now. The cameras clicked faster, yet both of them knew the walk was no longer about fame. It was about something deeper. Anna felt, her pulse steady as the warmth of Keanu's presence reminded her she was not invisible, not forgotten. Still, behind her smile, a quiet storm remained. Once inside the hall, the noise of the red carpet faded into music and soft conversation. Chandeliers hung above like golden stars, and the tables sparkled with polished glass. Everyone looked perfect, their laughter rehearsed, their gestures practiced. But beneath the glitter, small currents of tension ran quietly. Anna and Keanu sat at a round table near the stage. The air was heavy with perfume and expectation. Anna noticed glances from across the room. Some were polite, others sharp, almost cold. She felt them land on her like tiny stones. Each look whispered something, unkind, something she could not hear but could feel. She leaned back in her chair, pretending not to notice, but Keanu noticed. He always noticed. He turned to her, his expression calm. "Don't let the noise inside their eyes enter you," he said quietly. Anna smiled faintly, but her heart ached. Why do they look at me like that? What did I do? Wrong? Keanu shook his head. You did nothing. Sometimes silence is not about you. Sometimes it is about them. Their hearts speak louder than their voices. The words stayed with her, but they did not erase the unease. As the evening continued, a strange pattern became clearer. Whenever Anna rose to greet someone, their smile seemed forced, their words clipped. A few avoided her altogether, turning quickly as if she were a shadow they didn't wish to touch. Finally, one woman, another actress she had worked with years ago, brushed past her. The woman's lips curved into a sharp smile. "Enjoying yourself, Anna?" she asked, but her tone carried no kindness. Before Anna could reply, she turned away, leaving behind a trail of unspoken bitterness. Anna's chest tightened. She felt heat rise to her face, and her fingers curled slightly under the table. Keanu, sitting beside her, placed a steady hand on the back of her chair. It was not a dramatic gesture, not loud or noticeable to anyone else. But to her, it felt like a shield. Yet deep down, she knew something was wrong. It wasn't random. It wasn't just her imagination. There was a reason behind the cold eyes, the silence, the whispers she could almost hear but not quite. The host's voice rang out from the stage, announcing the next part of the evening, but Anna barely heard it. Her mind was tangled in questions. She wanted to believe Keanu's words, that silence belonged to others and not to her. But what if this silence carried a truth she wasn't ready to face? She looked around the room once more, scanning the faces lit by golden light. And then she saw it. Someone in the far corner, watching her closely, their expression unreadable. Unlike the others, this person wasn't pretending, wasn't smiling, wasn't turning away. They were waiting, and in that gaze, Anna felt the first spark of a mystery. The music played softly, and laughter floated around the golden hall, but Anna's focus stayed on the person in the far corner. They hadn't moved, not once, since she noticed them. Their eyes remained fixed on her, steady, almost heavy. Unlike the others who ignored her with silence or cold smiles, this gaze felt different, intentional, deliberate, as if they knew something no one else did. Anna shifted in her seat, pretending to listen to the speech happening on stage, but her chest tightened. Every time she tried to look away, she found her eyes returning to that corner, to the quiet figure still watching. Keanu, who had been speaking gently to someone at their table, noticed her unease. He leaned slightly toward her, his voice calm but clear. "Who are you looking at?" She hesitated, then whispered, Someone over there. They've been watching me since we came in. Keanu didn't turn immediately. He waited, as though patience itself was his shield. Then, in one smooth movement, he glanced across the room. His eyes landed on the figure for just a second before he looked back at Anna. His expression didn't change, but his silence told her enough. He had seen them too. "Do you know them?" Keanu asked. Anna shook her head. "No, but it feels like they know me." Her voice carried a tremor she couldn't hide. She forced a smile when another guest passed by, but as soon as they were gone, her expression fell again. Moments later, the hall burst into applause as the host announced an award. People rose to cheer, clapping with practiced enthusiasm. Anna clapped too, but her hands felt heavy. When the noise filled the hall, she dared to glance back at the corner. The figure was gone. Her breath caught. A chill rushed through her spine, colder than any silence before. Keanu noticed immediately. "They left?" he asked, his tone more statement than question. Anna nodded slowly. "Just vanished." For the rest of the evening, unease followed her like a shadow. The cold stares from others still hurt, but this was different. It was not about being ignored anymore. It was about being seen too closely, too deeply by someone she did not know. Later that night, when the lights dimmed and guests began leaving, Keanu walked beside her through the grand hallway. His calm presence was steady, but Anna's thoughts raced. "Maybe it's nothing," she tried to say, as though speaking the words would make them true. Maybe they were just curious. But even she didn't believe her own words. Keanu stopped walking for a moment. His hand rested gently on her arm, making her turn toward him. "Anna," he said softly, "curiosity doesn't last that long. Whoever that was, they had a reason." She swallowed hard. She wanted to argue, to push away the rising fear, but she couldn't. Deep down, she knew Keanu was right. As they stepped out into the night air, flashes of cameras greeted them once again. But this time, Anna didn't care about the attention, the lights, or the noise. Her mind stayed locked on the figure who had watched her in silence, the figure who disappeared without a trace. And somewhere in her heart, she knew this was not the last time she would see them. The night air outside the hall was cool, yet Anna's skin burned with unease. The laughter and applause behind her faded, but her mind would not let go of the shadow she had seen. Whoever that person was, their gaze had pierced deeper than all the silence and cold stares combined. Keanu walked quietly at her side. He didn't speak, and that silence was not heavy. It was steady, like a blanket placed gently on her shoulders. He knew when words healed, and when they only added noise. Anna finally broke the quiet. "Keanu, what if I've done something wrong? What if all those stares, all that silence, what if I caused it?" Her voice cracked, soft and fragile. She hated how small it sounded, but it was the truth. Keanu stopped walking, and she turned to face him. His eyes were calm, holding the same patience that had guided him through so many storms. "Anna," he said slowly, "kindness is not something people always notice. And sometimes silence is not about truth. It's about fear, envy, or misunderstanding. Don't carry their silence as your own burden." His words wrapped around her, warm and steady, but her doubts didn't vanish. Deep inside, she still wondered. What if there was more? What if someone knew something about her that she didn't know herself? The car pulled up, and they stepped inside. The city lights moved past the window, blurred and distant. Anna leaned, her head against the glass, watching reflections of strangers pass by. She thought about the days when acting was only about passion, when she cared only about the craft and not the noise around it. But fame had changed things. Now every silence felt like a judgment, every look a secret. Keanu's voice broke gently into her thoughts. "You're strong, Anna. I've seen it. You don't need the applause to prove it. She turned to him, her eyes wet but steady. But strength feels useless when the room turns cold. He didn't argue. Instead, he gave her something rarer than advice. He gave her presence. He sat with her in that moment without trying to erase her feelings. Sometimes just being there was the truest kindness. The car slowed, pulling up to her place. As she stepped out, a strange sensation made her pause. The street was quiet, but not empty. She glanced across the road, and her heart stopped. There, half hidden beneath the shadows of a streetlight, stood the same figure from the hall. They weren't moving, just watching. Not a fan, not a paparazzi. This felt different. Anna froze, her breath shallow. Keanu stepped beside her, his sharp eyes following her line of sight. His body shifted slightly, protective without being obvious. But by the time he looked, the figure had already stepped back into the dark, swallowed by silence once more. Anna's voice trembled. "You saw them, right? I'm not imagining this." Keanu nodded slowly. "You're not imagining. Someone is watching, and they want you to know it." Her chest tightened. The silence was no longer just about being ignored. It was a message. A message she didn't yet understand, but one that had already begun to shape the night. The night stretched long after that. Anna could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the figure in the corner of the hall, then again under the streetlight. The silence of their presence was louder than all the voices she had heard that evening. It was not the silence of strangers who ignored her. It was a silence that felt intentional, like a message whispered without words. She sat by her window, watching the city lights fade into the horizon. The world outside looked calm, but inside her, storms gathered. She wanted to believe Keanu's words, that she was not at fault, that silence belonged to others and not her. But now she was certain. Someone was following her, someone who wanted her to feel this weight. Morning came, and she decided not to keep her fears hidden. She called Keanu. His voice, when he answered, was calm as always, carrying the steady warmth that anchored her heart. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted softly. "I know," he replied. "I couldn't either. We need to understand who this is." They agreed to meet at a quiet cafe tucked away from the noise of the city. When Anna arrived, Keanu was already there, seated by the window, his posture relaxed but his eyes alert. He greeted her with a small smile, one that reminded her she wasn't alone in this. Over coffee, they spoke in low voices. Anna told him how it felt, the heaviness of that gaze, the coldness in the hall, the shadow by her street. Keanu listened without interrupting, his presence steady, his silence respectful. When she finished, he leaned forward slightly. "Fear grows in silence, Anna. The longer we ignore it, the stronger it becomes. Whoever this is, they want you to feel weak. But you're not. You have to remember that." His words steadied her, but before she could respond, her eyes caught something outside the window. Across the street, among the moving crowd, stood the figure again. Still. Watching. Anna's breath caught in her throat. She placed her cup down, slowly, her hands trembling. "Keanu," she whispered, "they're here." Keanu turned his head calmly, not with fear, but with quiet control. His gaze met the figure's. For a brief moment, it felt like time stopped. The figure did not move, did not flinch. And then, as if following a script only they understood, they turned and disappeared once more into the folds of the city. Anna pressed her hand against her chest, trying to calm her racing heart. "Why? Why are they doing this?" Keanu looked at her gently. "Because silence is a kind of power, but only if we allow it to break us." His words sank deep, but the fear remained. This was no longer about being ignored or forgotten. This was about being singled out, being chosen by someone who carried a secret. As they left the cafe together, Keanu stayed close, his presence a quiet shield. Anna glanced behind her more than once, but the figure was gone. Yet the weight of their silence remained heavy in her chest. That night, back at home, Anna sat alone in her living room. The city outside was quiet, the kind of quiet that hides too many things. Her phone buzzed softly. She picked it up, expecting a message from Keanu, but the screen showed something else. No name, no number, only a message. You are not being ignored. You are being prepared. Anna's hands shook as she read it. Her heart pounded. The silence had finally spoken. The message stayed on her screen, glowing in the dim light of her living room. You are not being ignored. You are being prepared. The words dug into her chest, sharp and heavy, yet strangely clear. Prepared for what? Who was behind it? Anna's fingers trembled as she dialed Keanu. He answered almost instantly, his calm voice steadying her like an anchor in rough waters. What happened? He asked, already sensing the fear in her silence. Read the message aloud. The line hung in the air between them, unsettling and cryptic. Keanu was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, We need to face this. Running from silence only gives it more power. Meet me tomorrow. We'll find the truth. The next day, they met again. This time not at a cafe or a hall, but in a quiet park away from flashing cameras and heavy eyes. The morning sun filtered through the trees, painting the ground with light and shadow. It felt safer, but the unease inside Anna's chest did not leave. As they sat on a wooden bench, Keanu spoke softly. Anna, sometimes when the world turns cold, it isn't because you are forgotten. It is because you are being tested. There is always someone who wants to see how strong you can be. She wanted to believe him. But before she could reply, her eyes caught movement near the trees. The figure was there, not hiding this time, not just watching. Slowly they began to walk toward her. Anna's breath quickened, but Keanu stayed calm, his presence grounding her. Stay steady, he whispered. Don't let fear decide for you. The figure stepped closer until their face became clear. It was a man, older, with lines of time etched into his skin. His expression was not cruel, not angry. It was sorrowful, almost broken. He stopped a few feet away, his voice low but steady. I am sorry, he said. Anna blinked, her confusion mixing with fear. Sorry? For what? Who are you? The man lowered his eyes, then lifted them again with weight in his gaze. I once worked with you, years ago. Not on stage, not in front of the cameras. I was part of the crew, unseen, forgotten. I watched you rise while I was left behind, and I let bitterness grow inside me. When I saw you tonight, I wanted you to feel what I felt, what it means to be invisible. His words landed heavy in the quiet air. Anna's heart tightened. She remembered small moments, small faces from past sets, people who worked tirelessly, behind the scenes, faces that blurred with time. The man's voice cracked. But then I saw what he did. He nodded toward Keanu. How he reached for you. How he gave you kindness when the world turned away. It broke something in me. I realized silence can hurt, but kindness can heal. I came back, not to harm you, but to face my own truth. Tears pricked Anna's eyes. She stepped forward, her voice gentle. You carried pain for so long, but you didn't need to give it to me. I never wanted you to feel unseen. No one deserves that. For a long moment, the three of them stood, in silence. Not heavy, not cruel, but human. Keanu's calm gaze softened as he watched the exchange. Anna reached out her hand slowly. The man hesitated, then placed his shaking hand in hers. Her touch was light, but it carried something deeper than words. Forgiveness, recognition, respect. The man's shoulders eased, as though a weight he had carried for years finally slipped away. Keanu finally spoke. "We are all forgotten sometimes, but kindness brings us back to each other." The man nodded, tears filling his tired eyes. Without another word, he turned and walked away, not as a shadow now, but as a man finally free of silence. Anna stood there, her heart beating fast, but lighter than it had been in days. She looked at Keanu. "Thank you," she whispered. He smiled gently. "Don't thank me. You chose kindness when you could have chosen anger. That is what people will remember." In that moment, Anna understood. The night that began with silence ended with something greater: respect, humility, kindness. She was not ignored. She was reminded of what truly mattered.